Namaste viewers. This is the next part of the income and employment theory, and this is the concept of consumption and savings. So the relation between consumption and savings is what is shown in the slide here. Beginning with the basic equation, income is equal to consumption plus savings is what is given there onto the left hand side. Yeah, can you see that? Y is equal to C plus S. That is, as the economy receives its income, it is going to use up that income on the consumption and the saving. Now this basic equation divided by Y. So what you get is Y by Y is equal to C by Y plus S by Y. Now that will become, Y by Y will become 1. C by Y, you know, it is nothing but the average propensity to consume. S by Y is nothing but the average propensity to save. So, from the basic equation Y is equal to C plus S, we arrive at the relationship between the average propensity to consume and the average propensity to save. So, average propensity to consume plus the average propensity to save is equal to 1. Again, with the same basic equation, Y is equal to C plus S. Now onto this equation, introduce change. So that would become change in Y is equal to change in C plus change in S. Introduce change to this equation. So that can be written as delta Y is equal to delta C plus delta S. Divide the entire equation by delta Y. So what you will have is delta Y by delta Y is equal to delta C by delta Y plus delta S by delta Y. So this becomes, in the next step, 1 is equal to MPC plus MPS, because you know that delta C by delta Y, or change in consumption due to change in income, is nothing but the marginal propensity to consume. Similarly, the change in the saving due to change in the income is nothing but the marginal propensity to save. So, on the whole, the relationship between the APC and APS, MPC and MPS is understood from the basic equation Y is equal to C plus S. So, let me repeat. The average propensity to consume plus average propensity to save will be equal to 1, and the marginal propensity to consume plus the marginal propensity to save is also equal to 1, right? Now moving on to the consumption and the saving function. Consumption, you know that it prevails even when there is no income. That is the autonomous consumption concept. Autonomous consumption prevails even at zero income, and also you are aware that as income increases, consumption will also increase. So the change in the consumption due to the change in the income, which is nothing but the marginal propensity to consume, can be measured along the consumption curve. That's also known to you now. So what is a consumption function? Consumption, it depends on the income, right? Also, there is this small autonomous consumption part. So the consumption function can be written as C is equal to C bar plus BY. While C bar is the autonomous consumption or the income inelastic consumption, B is nothing but the slope of the consumption curve. If I say slope of the consumption curve, then you know that slope of the consumption curve is nothing but change in C due to change in Y. You can measure the change in C due to change in Y along the slope of the consumption curve. So B is nothing but the marginal propensity to consume, right? So getting back to the equation, C is equal to C bar plus BY. C bar is autonomous consumption. B is the marginal propensity to consume, which depends upon the specific level of income. So, consumption is C, which is equal to C bar plus BY. Now, from this consumption curve, one can from this consumption function rather, one can derive the saving function. Once more, start with the basic equation y is equal to c plus s. So that can also be written as y minus c is equal to s. Now, in the place of consumption or c, substitute this equation. So that would become y minus c bar plus by. And then you can take out y from the bracket. So that would be y minus by minus c bar, which will be equal to s. So taking y out, what you will get is 1 minus b, right? It is y minus by. From there, you're taking y out. So that would be 1 minus b. Y into 1 minus b is what you have. Minus c bar, that remains the same, is equal to s. So s is nothing but minus c bar plus y into 1 minus b, right? Minus c bar is nothing but the dissaving part that the economy has to undertake so that it can go to fund the autonomous consumption. So C bar is expressed as minus C bar, or autonomous consumption will be equal to dissaving part. You already know that MPC plus MPS is equal to 1, right? So if B is nothing but the marginal propensity to consume, or MPC, then 1 minus B, which is the slope of the saving curve. Now B was the slope of the consumption curve, and 1 minus B is nothing but the slope of the saving curve, or that is nothing but the MPS. Yeah, that is 1 minus MPC, which is nothing but MPS, right? So look at that, that's what I've written there, because MPC plus MPS is equal to 1. 1 minus B can be expressed as MPS, right? So here is the consumption and the saving function. So let me repeat. If consumption function can be expressed as C bar plus by, C is autonomous consumption, B is nothing but the marginal propensity to consume, which depends upon the level of income, and saving, which is basically derived from the consumption and the income, can be expressed as minus C bar plus y into 1 minus B. So this minus C bar is the dissaving part due to autonomous consumption, and 1 minus B is nothing but the marginal propensity to save. Fine, hope that was clear. Now moving on to derivation of the saving from the consumption. From the consumption curve, how to derive the saving curve. Now this diagram, yeah, you know that the income line is the 45-degree line, and the consumption, it begins from the y-axis. Beginning from the y-axis, it positively slopes up. Also, you are aware of the detail that when y is equal to c, that is the break even, or that is the zero saving point. Now take up this distance OC along the y-axis. In the first panel of the diagram, OC is supposed to be the autonomous consumption, right? If that is the autonomous consumption, then to the same extent, you see that there is going to be the dissaving shown. Yeah? Okay. Where is the slide? Here is a slide. Right. So, OC is what is the autonomous consumption, which is represented by this letter C bar, right? Now in the second panel, what is shown is a saving curve, and then the, just a saving curve. So this saving, it begins from the negative quadrant, indicating the presence of dissaving. So this minus C bar is simply equal to this distance C bar. So in the first panel, the distance OC can be measured, and the same can be represented in the second panel to indicate this minus C bar or the dissaving. And then you know that saving function also is positively related to the income. So as you measure income along the x-axis, as income increases, savings will also increase. So after this saving portion, as income increases, savings will increase. And you know that at break even, it's a zero saving point. So the saving curve will cut the x-axis and will continue to slope up, indicating as income increases, savings will also increase. Now refer to the first panel. After the break even, Y is more than C. That indicates the excess of income over the consumption or the positive saving portion, right? So this vertical distance between the break even and the x-axis over here, that is a link that shows the zero saving point, or the break even is connected to the zero saving point. Fine. So that's how the saving function is derived from the consumption function, right? So then moving on to the other basic concepts, autonomous and the induced investment concept. Autonomous investment, you already know that it is not affected by change in the level of income. That is, whatever be the income level, this investment will remain constant. So normally, if the profitability or the income motive is not there, such investments are always undertaken by the government for the welfare of the population. So let's say huge public expenditures that the government is going to undertake for construction, infrastructural development and so on, it comes under this category. And then autonomous investment is parallel to the x-axis. This concept is known to you already. You have understood that AD in a two-sector model, it is C plus I, and the I is the autonomous investment, and the AD curve, you know how it is. So autonomous investment curve, it is parallel to the x-axis. How about induced investment? Induced investment, it refers to the investment which depends upon the profit expectations, and it is directly influenced by the income level, right? So naturally, the private sector or the firms will be undertaking such investments, and if investment is measured along the y-axis and income is measured along the x-axis, then since induced investment is positively related to the income, it would be an upward sloping curve, right? So to further understand this concept, we will see the diagram, right? So this is the autonomous investment curve. Income is measured along the x-axis, investment is measured along the y-axis. So look at this autonomous investment curve. It is parallel to the x-axis, and you see that at all the levels of income, the investment remains fixed. So II is the autonomous investment curve. So whether the income is OY or OY1 or even zero, immaterial of that, the autonomous investment remains the same or it remains fixed, right? Look at the induced investment curve. Once more, the income is measured along the x-axis and investment is measured along the y-axis. So induced investment, since it is induced by the income, as income increases, investment also increases. So it's a positively sloping curve. II is a positively sloping curve, and you can see that when income is OY and when income changes to OY1, you see investment increases from OM to OM1. So that is the induced investment curve, right? Now, induced investment, what is it induced by? It is induced by the marginal efficiency of the investment. So this marginal efficiency of the investment can be measured by the prospective yield and the supply price. That is, the prospective yield of the investment divided by the supply price into 100 will give you MEI. So what is the supply price and what is this prospective yield? if an entrepreneur is going to undertake an investment, the return from the investment, the expected return from the investment is what is the prospective yield. Supply price is nothing but the market price of the asset. You know that fixed investments are undertaken by the entrepreneurs in the process of production. So supply price refers to the cost of the investment, right? And prospective yield is the return from the investment. So the return from the investment divided by the cost of the investment into 100 will give you the MEI. Let me repeat. The return from the investment divided by the cost of the investment into 100 will give you the marginal efficiency of investment. Now, the next factor that affects the induced investment is the rate of interest. Now, not all the entrepreneurs will be able to pitch in their own capital. They may be borrowing and using up the money to invest. So, if they borrow, they would end up paying a rate of interest. That would become the cost of borrowing. So, basically, the marginal efficiency of the investment should work out to be more than the rate of interest paid for the borrowing. So, if the marginal efficiency of the investment is more than the rate of interest, then it's worthwhile an investment. Investment can be undertaken. So, that is why induced investment is undertaken by the private entrepreneurs who look forth for a profit, right? So, marginal efficiency of the investment, let me repeat, should be more than the rate of interest. And marginal efficiency of the investment can be calculated as the return from the investment divided by the cost of the asset into 100. Rate of interest is the cost of borrowing. So, MEI should be more than ROI. Then it will be a profitable venture for the firm, right? Now, this is the last concept in the first chapter of this unit. The term ex ante and ex post. Ex ante refers to planned. You have understood whatever it is, whether it is aggregate demand or the aggregate supply or the saving or the investment in this particular unit, all of them are the planned or the desired amount of expenditure or income or saving or investment. So, ex ante AD, ex ante AS means the planned AD or the planned AS, right? Again, ex ante saving, ex ante investment means the planned saving or the planned investment. That is, given the level of income, what is the desired expenditure? What is the desired saving? What is the desired investment? Or what is the planned investment, saving and aggregate demand or expenditure? So, that is the ex ante concept. Only at the equilibrium, the ex ante or the planned aggregate demand will be equal to the ex ante aggregate supply, right? Similarly, only at the equilibrium, the ex ante saving or the planned saving will be equal to the ex ante investment or the planned investment. Why is that so? Because the act of saving and investment, they are undertaken by two different sectors. Saving is undertaken by the consumer household sector, and they undertake saving with an objective of safety and security. They abstain from consumption, that is, they do not consume the entire income, and then they save up a little bit because they have this safety and security reasons. They want to save up something for the future, and they will be saving in small quantities. So the consumer households, they will undertake the saving, and they will do that with a safety security reason, and they will do it in small quantities. Whereas the planned investment in the economy mostly is undertaken by the production units or the firms, and the firms, they undertake the investment mostly in large quantities, and they take it up with a profitability motive. So you see that saving, investment, they are taken up by different groups, they are taken with a different objective, and they are also undertaken in different quantities. That is why the planned saving and the planned investment is not always equal. It's only equal at the equilibrium, right? So that is the ex ante and the ex post concept, right? So with that, we come to the end of this particular chapter. More on the income and employment chapter, we would see that in the subsequent videos. Keep watching. Thank you.